For 15 years, I built my husband's company. I was there the night he had the idea. I was there the morning after, when he was already second-guessing it. I registered the company. I found the first 3 clients. I handled every invoice, every supplier call, every late night when the numbers weren't working, for the first 4 years of that business's life. By the time Rohan walked into a divorce court with another woman and told the judge the company was entirely his, it was worth 11 crore rupees. He said I had no legal claim to any of it. My lawyer waited. Then she placed one document on the table, the original company registration. Page 1, line 1, 2 founders, his name and mine. This is the full story, from the beginning. My name is Sarah, and I met Rohan at 24, at the kind of unremarkable professional gathering where people exchange cards they never follow up on. He was 27, working in a mid-level sales role at a company he found uninspiring, with the slightly restless energy of someone who has a larger idea of themselves than their current situation accommodates. I was finishing a postgraduate degree in business management and doing freelance accounting work on the side to pay for it. We married 2 years later. I was 26. He was 29. It was, in the ordinary sense of the word, a happy beginning. We were compatible in the practical ways. Similar habits, shared sense of humor, the same broad orientation toward what we wanted our life to look like. We rented a flat in the city. We built a routine. We were, by any external measure, a functional and forward-moving unit. Rohan had an idea for a company about 8 months into our marriage. We were at dinner, a Tuesday night, nothing special, when he started talking about it. He had noticed something in the industrial supply space through his sales work, a consistent gap between what manufacturers needed and what the existing supply chains were delivering, particularly for mid-sized operations that were too large for informal sourcing and too small to attract the attention of the major distributors. His idea was a brokerage, a connecting service that would work specifically with that underserved middle tier. It was a good idea. I could see that immediately, and I told him so, which I think was important because by the following morning, he had almost entirely talked himself out of it. The gap between having an idea and believing you are the person who should execute it is large, and Rohan's particular psychological architecture, confident in rooms, less confident alone with a blank page, made that gap especially wide. I was the one who sat with him for 3 weeks after that dinner and helped turn it from a dinner conversation into something real. I drafted the initial business plan. I researched the registration requirements. I modeled the early financials, what the first-year costs would look like, what the client acquisition would need to achieve for the operation to be viable within 18 months. I had the skills for this. My business management training and the accounting work I had been doing for 2 years meant that the practical mechanics of turning an idea into a registered operation were genuinely within my competence. When we registered the company, both our names went on the founding documents. This was a practical decision as much as anything else. We were a household. We were both contributing, and at that early stage, the company had no employees and no external investors, and the 2 people putting in the work were us. Rohan's name came first on the registration, because the idea had been his and because it felt right to reflect that. My name was on page 1 as co-founder. My signature was on the founding documents. This was not a minor administrative detail. It was the legal record of what the company was when it began. The first year was the hardest. Rohan handled the client-facing work, the meetings, the relationship building, the presentations to potential partners. This suited him. He was good in those rooms, good at listening to what people said they needed and reflecting it back to them in a way that felt understood. What he was less good at was the back-end infrastructure of what he was promising. The systems, the documentation, the financial management, the supplier vetting processes that would determine whether the service actually delivered what the sales conversations implied it would. I built all of that. For the first 4 years of the company's operation, I handled the accounts, the operational processes, the vendor documentation, the compliance requirements. I did this alongside the freelance work I continued to take on, because in those early years, the company couldn't yet pay both of us a salary and Rohan's income from the business needed to cover the household. I was not resentful of this. I understood the logic. We were building something, and in the early stages of building something, the people doing it absorb the costs because they believe in the outcome. By year 4, the company was profitable and growing. By year 6, Rohan had hired his first full-time employee, a sales executive, and I had handed off most of the day-to-day accounting to a part-time bookkeeper. My role shifted. I was less operationally hands-on and more strategically involved. The person Rohan talked through decisions with, the person who reviewed proposals before they went out, the person who understood the company's financial position more clearly than anyone else because I had been tracking it from the beginning. I also, at some point in those years, became less visible. This happened gradually and without any declared intention. The company became, in the way companies become associated with their most publicly present person, Rohan's company in the conversations people had about it. At client events, I was his wife. At industry gatherings, I stood slightly to the side. This is not unusual. Many women in similar positions will recognize the pattern. The way the person who is present in the room becomes the person the room associates with the work, regardless of who actually did it. I didn't fight it. I told myself it didn't matter. The work was the work, and the work was real, and the company that existed was the company we had built, and that was what counted. I was wrong to think that way. I understand that now. By year 10, the company had 12 employees, a client list that included several regional manufacturers, and a reputation in the industrial supply brokerage space that Rohan had worked hard to build and deserved credit for building. It also had a financial structure, an operational infrastructure, and a set of systems that had been built by me and were still, even after I had stepped back from day-to-day involvement, fundamentally shaped by the decisions I had made in the first 4 years. Year 12 is when I noticed the first thing I couldn't explain. It was a phone call Rohan ended too quickly when I walked into the room. A small thing. The kind of thing that, in isolation, means nothing, and that I filed away and chose not to examine because examining it required a conclusion I was not ready to reach. Over the following year, the small things accumulated. I want to tell you the story of what happened over that year, but I also want to tell it accurately, which means telling you that the accumulation of small things is not a clear or dramatic process. It is not a revelation that arrives on a specific day and announces itself. It is a slow, unwilling education in a reality you are resisting at every step. You notice a thing. You find an explanation that isn't the obvious one. You notice another thing. You find another explanation. At some point, the explanations run out and you are standing in the middle of a reality you can no longer avoid. The reality, when I finally stood in the middle of it, was this. Rohan was in a relationship with a woman named Kavya, who had been working as a consultant for one of the company's clients for approximately 18 months. I found out not through confrontation or confession, but through a document. A hotel booking confirmation that came through on a shared email account neither of us had thought to separate from the other's access. The irony of documentation being the thing that told me was not lost on me later. When I asked Rohan directly, he didn't deny it. He sat across from me in our kitchen. The kitchen of the flat we had moved into in year 5. The flat I had found and negotiated the lease on and furnished while he was traveling for client meetings. And he said, with the particular quietness of someone who has been carrying something for a long time and is relieved to put it down, that he wanted a divorce. He said Kavya was the person he wanted to be with. He said our marriage had become something he wasn't able to sustain. He said he hoped we could handle the separation without it becoming something damaging. I asked him about the company. He said the company was his, that it had been his vision, his work, his relationships. That my involvement in the early years had been as a spouse supporting her husband's venture, not as a co-founder with an ongoing legal stake. He said his lawyer had reviewed the situation and was confident in that position. I listened to all of this. I didn't say very much. When he finished, I said, I think you should talk to your lawyer again. Tell him to look at the founding documents. Rohan looked at me for a moment. Then he said, Sarah, that was 15 years ago. Those early documents don't. I said, tell him to look. I want to tell you about the moment I realized what I actually had, because the realization came in a specific and undramatic way that I think is important to describe accurately. 3 days after Rohan told me he wanted a divorce, I went to the metal filing cabinet in the study that we had owned since year 2, and that had never, in 15 years, been properly organized. I went through it methodically, looking for the copies of our financial documents. And in the second drawer, in a manila folder labeled with Rohan's handwriting that said Company Registration, I found the original founding documents. I sat on the floor of the study and read them. Page 1, company name, registration date, founders, 2 names, his, then mine. Below them, 2 signatures, his, then mine, notarized, filed, 15 years old and completely, unambiguously clear. I called a lawyer the next morning. If Sarah's story is reaching you right now, if you have ever put everything into something and then been told it was never really yours, please like this video and subscribe to this channel. Leave a comment below. Tell me one word that describes how it feels to be erased from something you built. I read every comment, every time. Now let me tell you what happened in that courtroom, because this is the part that mattered most. Her name was Advocate Deepa Nair, and she had practiced family and commercial law for 24 years. When I sat across from her and laid out the situation, the marriage, the company, the founding documents, Rohan's position, she listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she asked 3 questions. The first was about the date the company was registered. The second was about my documented involvement in the first 4 years. Were there emails, accounts, supplier contracts, anything that placed me in an operational role? The third was about the founding documents themselves, Did I have the originals or copies? I had originals. I had 15 years of emails. I had supplier contracts with my signature. I had 4 years of the company's accounts in my handwriting. Advocate Nair looked at the founding documents for a long time. Then she said, very calmly, his lawyer made an error. Co-founder status on the founding registration is not a formality that expires. He should have checked before advising your husband that his position was confident. The legal process took 7 months. Rohan's lawyer argued that my co-founder status had been nominal, that I had been listed as a formality and had not been an active participant in the company's development in any meaningful legal sense. Advocate Nair addressed this with 15 years of documentation. The emails from the first 4 years, supplier negotiations, client onboarding, compliance filings, all with my name on them. The accounts I had managed, in my handwriting, with my signature. The business plan I had drafted, which she had an expert identify as being written by the same hand as the accompanying accounting documents. She also commissioned a business valuation that independently assessed the company's current value and provided an expert opinion on what the early stage operational infrastructure, the systems, the processes, the financial management that had been established in years 1 through 4, had contributed to the company's eventual success. The valuation put that contribution at a significant and specific percentage of the company's growth trajectory. The court date arrived. I sat at the table with Advocate Nair. Rohan sat across from us with his lawyer and, in the row behind him, Kavya, who had the careful expression of someone trying to look uninvested in the outcome of something she had a great deal of interest in. Rohan's lawyer opened. He was confident. He had been confident throughout the process, right up until the point, about 40 minutes in, when Advocate Nair placed the original founding documents on the table in front of the judge and walked through them methodically and in detail. The judge read page 1. He read the names. He read the signatures. He read the notarization. He looked up. He asked Rohan's lawyer a question about the basis for the claim that the co-founder status was nominal. Rohan's lawyer began to answer. Partway through the answer, he stopped. He looked at his notes. He looked at the founding documents. He looked at the supplementary documentation Advocate Nair had filed, the emails, the accounts, the business plan, the expert valuation. He stopped talking. The room was very quiet. I looked at Rohan. His face had gone through several things very quickly. The confidence he had walked in with had collapsed entirely. What was left underneath it was something I had not expected to see there. Not rage, not calculation, but a genuine, visible reckoning. The face of someone who had told himself a story for 15 years and was sitting in the specific moment when the story stopped being sustainable. The judge ruled on the basis of the founding documents, the documented operational contribution, and the expert valuation. My co-founder status was legally recognized. The settlement reflected what the court determined was a fair and accurate representation of my contribution to the company's existence and growth. 48%. I did not take the 48% as an ongoing stake in the company. I had no interest in remaining connected to the operation that Rohan would continue to run. What I took was a buyout, negotiated and agreed upon, structured over a payment timeline that the company's current cash position could support. The number, when it was finalized, was 4 crore and 31 lakh rupees. I want to tell you what I did with it, because I think it matters. I did not do anything dramatic or symbolic with it. I did not make gestures. I took the money and I used it, practically and without ceremony, to build the thing I should have built 15 years earlier, something of my own. A financial consulting practice, working specifically with early-stage businesses on the operational and accounting infrastructure that they need in their first 4 years to have any chance of surviving. The work I had been doing for Rohan's company, formalized and offered to people who would pay for it and recognize it as the work it actually was. I have 4 clients now, 8 months in. None of them are large. All of them value what I bring. All of them know my name. I moved into a flat on the other side of the city. I own it. It is smaller than the one I shared with Rohan, and it is mine in a way that the larger one never entirely was. I think about the founding documents sometimes. The manila folder in the filing cabinet, Rohan's handwriting on the label, 15 years of dust on the outside, and 2 signatures on page 1 still completely legible inside. He had not thought to take them. He had not thought to check them. He had been so confident in the narrative he had built. The company was his vision, his work, his achievement, that it had not occurred to him that the paper record of the company's beginning told a different and older story. The thing about documents is that they don't revise themselves to match the version of events that becomes convenient later. They stay exactly as they were when they were made. They hold the original truth the way nothing else does. Not memory, not narrative, not the careful reconstruction of what things meant. Just the date, the names, and the signatures. Exactly as they were. I was there at the beginning. My name was on page 1. That was always true. It just took 15 years and a very quiet lawyer for the room to hear it. If Sarah's story stayed with you, you already know what this channel is about. It's not about revenge in the loud sense. It's not about the dramatic moment or the public confrontation. It's about something quieter and more durable than either of those things. It's about the document that was always there. The name that was always on page 1. The truth that doesn't revise itself, no matter how long someone else's version of events goes unchallenged. Sarah didn't fight for 15 years. She didn't demand recognition or declare her contribution or make it someone else's problem that she wasn't being seen. She did the work. And when the moment came, the work spoke for itself. In ink, on a document, in a courtroom, in front of a judge who read the names aloud. That's the kind of justice that lasts. Subscribe to this channel. Share this story with someone who has given everything to something and been told it was never theirs. And until next time, your name is on page 1. Make sure the right people know how to read. For 15 years, I built my husband's company. I was there the night he had the idea.